we've met us yesterday at the first night at the premiere of Star Wars. I congratulate you to your work. It's
Thank
really
you.
a masterpiece, isn't it?
It's a good movie, I think. I think maybe it's hard for me to say this, but it's one of the best. I think certainly the best of the prequels, but maybe the best one of all, because it's got everything and more. The story is, well, almost complete. It leads into the next episode, I think, very successfully. There's still some mysteries, but that's good. George has always kept some things in the shadows. And it's full of emotional sweep. So all of us actors get a chance to really pull out all the stops, and that's fun.
And how do you get the role?
All those years ago, yes, well, I've been with this film, or rather these films have been with me for over 20 years now. And one day, out of the blue, I got a call from my agent who said, George Lucas would like to see you, and a car will be coming shortly. And I looked out of my window and the car had already arrived, magically. So I got in it, and I went down to Elstree Studios, and there was George Lucas and the director of Return of the Jedi, Richard Marquand. They'd had a lunch break, and we just talked about the weather, I remember, and things like that. And then he said, thank you, nice to meet you. And as I was leaving, George said, hey, great nose. And I thought, that must mean something. And when I got home, the phone was ringing, and my agent said, you've got the part. And I said, oh, great, what's the part? I assumed it was something to do with Star Wars, because I knew they were in London making the movie. And he looked at his notes and he said, oh, he's called the Emperor of the Universe. So I said, all right, here we go. And you know the rest.
Yes. As Emperor, you are really malicious and an evil character. How do you become such an evil character?
It's called acting, really. And it's always more fun to play darker people, I think. Everybody says this. There's always a fascination with the nature of the dark side. George said when he started the prequels that he thought people might not like this one as much as the others because it was dark. And I remember thinking they might like it even more, and now I've seen it, I really think that. It's because we're all fascinated with the dark aspects of our and other personalities. And I don't quite know why that is. Maybe because, in some senses, we understand the root of them, while hoping that that's not a journey that we would ever undertake. And that's the story of the movie, really. Anakin Skywalker goes down that path. And he does it, I think, for very understandable reasons. He's very emotionally mixed up. You know, he's had a relatively tough life up till then. He's a sort of hero, but, you know, he saw his mother die horribly. He's had a difficult childhood, no father to speak of. And he's forced to deny his love publicly because Jedis are not allowed to marry. So he's in a bit of an emotional state, but he also has that little grain of, I suppose, what we call Sith, the need, the desire for power, which my character takes hold of and ruthlessly exploits.
And don't you care about the reactions of the audience? I think I could imagine that they will be a little bit aggressive, perhaps.
Well, they're not really, because I think most people know that it's a movie and life is life. Some people don't, and well, that's a problem for a psychologist rather than for me. But it was interesting when we all appeared on stage in London just before the film, and we were all introduced, and everyone was cheered, and they cheered me, and then it converted into a very loud boo, and that's great. That's also part of the, I don't know, you'd probably be horrified if it happened here, but it's part of the English tradition of booing and hissing the villain. And the louder the boos, the stronger the hisses, the more successful you feel you've been. So that was a gratifying evening.
Yes. You played Palpatine in 5 of the 6 episodes and worked
That's right. Mm-hmm.
a very long time with Lucasfilm. What are you thinking about this long time period, the working process and the development of the film industry?
Yes, well, things have changed rapidly. I mean, and George has always been in the vanguard of change. That's one of the most interesting things about him. And he's never been interested in the status quo. He has strong ideas, and he's also had the courage to follow them through. That's how Star Wars happened. I mean, I think most of the major film companies thought he was a little mad to want to make a science fiction movie because the received wisdom was that science fiction equaled box office death. So he made the movie, and when it came out and he showed it to producers and so on, they thought that their worst fears had been confirmed. And I remember they didn't give him his full financial agreement, and George said, okay then, I'd like the franchise rights. And in those days that meant nothing, or very little. They probably thought, how sweet, he wants to print a couple of t-shirts. And as a result of owning the franchise of the movie, all of the rights associated with it, that enabled him to go on and make the other movies, and also to become wholly independent of the studio system, to really be in a position where he could dictate terms to the large corporations. And the movies are sort of, they're about lots of things. They're mainly about action and adventure, but the movies are also about that journey, about an individual's journey who is determined to work things out for himself. But George is also saying that on the way through that path, there are many temptations to go one way or another, and you have a choice. And if you make the wrong choice, you may be stymied for the rest of your life. So far, he's made a series of brilliant choices, I think.
I think too. George Lucas worked with a lot of special effects and all the computer technique, and you as an actor has to a lot of the scenes to play in front of a green screen. Is that more difficult, or is that easier?
Green screen, blue screen, it's part of the digital revolution, and that's the way movies are moving, and I think by and large that's good. As far as acting is concerned, it's never been that difficult for me, but I can see it has been for the younger actors, although they're brilliant at it, and they've learned through the movies to become more experienced, because often they're fighting invisible armies, invisible people, characters that haven't yet been created, imagined, finished. And George can give a certain amount of help, but beyond that he can't, because he doesn't have all the information himself, because he hasn't reached that point. And that's hard. The best thing about acting is to, as we are now, is to look at someone in the eyes and say your lines, listen to the response, and out of that something grows. So that's what we like. That's how we prefer to work on film. On the other hand, when you have someone to fight who isn't there, and I don't want to spoil this for anybody who hasn't seen the movie, but I have two fights in the movie, and one of them is with a small person, a rather important Jedi, and he never turns up. It's ridiculous. He's so unprofessional. So you have to make do. There's this guy called Frank Oz who's always hanging around the set, but he's no use because he's too tall. So you have to imagine this low person at various parts of your eye line all over the place, but it's not that difficult, and I get to fight him. So we worked out a very precise choreographed sequence, a bit as you would work out a dance, where he was and what I'd do, whether he was on the offensive, whether I was, and so on, when I tried to hurl these gigantic Senate pods at him and when he was throwing them at me. And we went through that several times. And then George said, I think we should just do a few improvised moments. So I did, some thrusts and parries and feints and so on, like a sort of a physical rap, really. And I did that for about 5 minutes and then collapsed in a heap on the floor, exhausted and laughing. And I think some of those moments end up in the final cut. So that it's sort of nuts, but it's fun. And it's all part of the process. Do you want to stop for a second? We've suddenly, yes. We've had, yeah.
Okay.
I'll continue. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's all part of the process. The best acting is when you're working with other people. But movies are always inviting you to go into extraordinary areas. And anyway, the whole business of making a movie, we're in a corner of the room usually. Lots of lights. The circumstances are totally unreal. And the other part of the studio, there are all these people doing their job. But when the word turnover is mentioned, the whole place goes completely silent. And it's probably one of the few places in the world where you can get perfect peace. There's the odd aeroplane, or maybe a pigeon in the loft, but then we stop. Or maybe a door opens, as it's just done now. And we try not to let it affect our performance, because you never stop until somebody says cut. But that's the magic of it, really. And it's hard to begin with, but once you realize that's what's going to happen, all the chaos, you try and absorb the chaos, and out of the chaos, with any luck, comes a concentrated performance.
Last question, please.
You're a great actor, you're a great director. How would you relate your role in Star Wars to your career?
Well, it's sort of like when you're in a Star Wars movie, you try just to think there's another part, a great part, terrific to have the opportunity. But of course, it's I hate this word, but it sort of applies. It is a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, there's no question about that, because it reaches so many people all over the world, more than any other film or series of films. So you have to be aware of that. At the same time, you know, you try to keep your feet on the ground. And as I work, as you've said, principally in the theatre, and movies are something that, especially if you're a British actor, you do now and again, if you're lucky enough to be offered one. But the notion of doing a movie now and again between plays has always appealed to me. And people say that maybe there'll be more invitations to do more movies after this. That's good, and I'd like to do that. But I suppose my heart and a little bit of my soul is always there in the theatre, and that grounds you.